He has recused himself from voting. Mentioned that last week. Joe Fode is running late. He's set to continue. So please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome our town hall staff and those watching this evening for our tax classification hearing. It is the only item on our agenda.
Mr. Chair, perhaps we could open with reading of the hearing notice, if someone is so willing.
I can do it.
Oh, yeah. Wait, I should have it, right?
Yeah, it's the
It's the
first.
first one, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll read it.
I thought you were going to be late, I'm sorry. You missed the pledge. We can do it.
You got it, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. The Board of Selectmen will continue a public hearing on Monday, December 1, 2014, at 6 p.m. at North Reading Town Hall, 235 North Street, room 14, to determine the percentage of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property for fiscal year 2015 in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56. Robert Messeri, Chairman.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, as the board members are aware, we had the hearing originally noticed to take place last Monday, November 24th. We were awaiting approval from the Department of Revenue of our valuation, which occurred this past Friday, November 28th. And so we are holding the hearing this evening with approved information available now for the board to consider. The board members should have received a text message from me a little while ago indicating that the Dropbox had been updated by the finance director to include a presentation that's been developed by yourself and the assessor, who are both here to make a presentation for the board to consider this evening. There was a draft package, if you may recall, that was put together for the board's information on November 24th. Please disregard that previous version. There's a final version that's now in there under the December 1st, 2014 meeting folder. And with that, I would turn it over to the finance director and the assessor.
Okay. Who's up? Both of these.
I'll take it. Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask Mr. Giliberto a question. Do you have the motions?
All set.
The motions
Thank
are,
you.
They're on here, okay. I can read it. I have.
they are on here, but you'll also have a paper copy there now.
Oh, okay, great.
I guess I'll entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Yule as the clerk for this evening.
So moved.
Second. No discussion?
No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
If it's not there, then I have them right here, Jeff.
Okay, good. That's what I can tell
Deborah?
you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for extending the time from the 24th to the 1st so that we had commitment on our values from the Department of Revenue. As Mike said, they are cleared now and totally approved. The classification hearing is a Board of Selectmen meeting to allocate the tax levy, whether you want to split a rate to be borne by the residential class, the open class, commercial, and industrial. So unfortunately, the open space, we do have to discuss that because that is one of your votes. The open space is a large tract of land that does not carry a classification. I'm not, if you want me to, I can read the whole thing, but we've read it before. We do not have any in North Reading. All of our large open tracts of land have a classification, whether it be farmland or whether it be DCR, which is state-owned land. We do not have any that is unclassified. So the Board of Assessors has determined that North Reading does not have any classified open space land. You can go to the next slide. The residential exemption is the second vote that you will have to take tonight. The Board of Selectmen may adopt an exemption of up to 20% to shift the residential class tax burden from the lower assessed properties that are the principal residence of a taxpayer to the higher assessed properties and properties that are not the principal residence of a taxpayer. And I'll explain that last statement a little bit. When you have a pond area, you may have a secondary home, so that wouldn't be their principal place of residence. So that would fall into that category. And the chart below that just shows the impact with the total residential class value and the total parcels, and the impact that it would receive on the higher class properties. Do we want to read those numbers, or?
I don't, I'm good with, Bob, she's asking you a question.
No, I heard.
Oh.
What is the cutoff at the 20%? How does that?
The cutoff from the 20%, well, the average is the 482,262. So the 20% would be for anything lower than that.
Okay. Okay, that's, I got it. All right.
So the exempt value per the parcels that would be accepted in that 20% discount would be the 87,000, I can't see the whole number, I gotta flip my page. $87,658 per parcel for those that qualify.
Ms. Neal.
Bear with me on this. These are numbers that I do find confusing for me, and when someone asks me a question, I sometimes don't feel the ability to answer them. So I'm not sure what we're describing here. This is a 20% exemption, and you mentioned a second home before earlier, so it's 20% exemption on the second home. Is that what I'm understanding?
If we had any second homes in the town, and I used reference to the pond area because there may be some down there, those are not a principal residence. This was designed really for a lot of your Cape Cod properties. So
Okay.
that's where it
Okay.
was derived, and they've just left the language in
Right.
there, but it pertains to the principal residence, the properties that are the principal residence of the taxpayer for the lower assessed to the higher assessed.
So in simple terms, right?
Appreciate that.
People with a low property value get a discount of up to 20%, depending on what is voted.
Right.
Right. And because there's a levy limit, and we have to raise the taxes that means that people that are in the higher
Tax bracket.
higher property valuation
Right.
would be paying more.
That 20%, I'll just kind of reiterate, Jeff, that 20% or the 87,682, that 658, I'm sorry, would have to shift in that $87,658 per parcel that would qualify or potentially qualify for this exemption would shift over to the higher assessed properties, like Bob was just saying.
Have we done this in the past?
No.
I know we've done the presentation, but have we approved it in the past?
No, we have not.
Okay,
No.
that's what I thought.
Not to my knowledge
Okay,
either.
that's what I thought, okay. I'm okay now.
The commercial exemption works the exact same way as the residential, only it's 10% of the shift. Now, the eligible parcels that may qualify have to have a valuation of less than $1 million and be owned by a business that employs fewer than 10 employees. Well, I do receive the Department of Workforce Development from the unemployment every year, and I do go through that, and we have 46 potential properties that could qualify for this. And again, that shift would just shift over to the higher properties. Are there any questions on that?
I'm behind you.
I'm sorry.
Would the shift be to the higher commercial properties or to all that?
It would be to the higher commercial and industrial properties. They call it the small commercial exemption, but it really should say small commercial and industrial. And again, that's taken right from the state information, so. Are there any other questions on the small commercial? And again, there's 46 potential properties. You're talking your mom and pop stores really is what you're talking, so just to keep that in mind. The Board of Selectmen, this is the last vote that you have to take. The Board of Selectmen may shift the town's tax burden from the residential class to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes, as long as the shift does not exceed the minimum residential factor. North Reading's minimum residential factor is 92.7157. What that 92.7157 represents is the residential taxes borne. We have 100% valuation. 92.7157 is residential class. That's your residential homes, your condos, your vacant land, all of that would fall under the residential class. So it's not just your single-family homes. This means that no more than 12.716 of the residential class burden can be shifted to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. The following pages contain information on the impact of any shift of the tax burden.
Mr. Chairman?
You've got me very, very confused with those numbers.
Okay?
Yeah, my number's different too.
One
Mr.
is
Chairman?
if we have I thought we had a residential, commercial, industrial mix of about 88% residential. You're saying it's really 92?
We're saying that total tax is 92.7157. That's where the 92 comes in. The valuation is 87.
Because of what?
What was that, Bob?
How do you get to 92 then?
Yeah.
Is this related to,
Because your slide, I thought your spreadsheet showed 87.28.
Yeah.
87.2.
Right, right.
yes,
Just to, first and foremost, the presentation reads 92.7157. The written documentation says 87.284. Could we have just an explanation as to that?
Yes.
Right.
I asked the same question. So, sheet that you showed me.
Right here. Oh, the LA 5.
Yes, where
Oh, the LA 7. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Right. Right. Yeah. So I was doing some calculating.
Here it is. Oh, I didn't bring that in. I didn't bring the LA 7 in. On the LA7, it's the split between the four classes, and the percentage borne by the residential class being your predominant class is your 92. So what this is saying is that we have 12.7% that is commercial, industrial, and personal property.
Yes, I understand
Okay.
that, but I
Right.
can't,
We can't wrap our heads around that 92.7,
this.
because it adds up to over
You're not
100%.
explaining how you get to that
I
number.
added that up on my calculator, and it added up to
If you add the two
100.
together, you come up over 100%. That can't be.
105%.
Right,
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why we're all
I
confused.
need a new calculator, Liz, because I did physically put that on my
92,
calculator to make
7157,
sure.
and 1271?
I'm gonna pull up the.
It's 104.88.
It's the LA7.
That's why I was over here doing calculations.
It's the LA
Go, go, something's not right,
deposit.
I'm not getting it.
It's 100.
We need to take a short recess?
No, it's right on the recap documents on the LA7.
Just one second.
Oh, no problem.
This was a question that I asked myself, and this form that I'm gonna show you displays it. So, Deb, if you want.
Yeah, if you scroll that down.
Sure. So there's your 87.
Yeah,
and
we
there's
get
the
that.
12, yep.
Mhm.
And then down here,
Is the minimum share that can shift.
Okay,
That's the
Okay.
minimum that
Calculation.
can
Okay.
be shifted
Okay, all right.
that makes a lot
from
more
the
sense.
residential.
Got it. I got it. Okay.
But I still need a new calculator.
well.
No?
No, because
Because
that,
we're explaining two different things.
Yeah.
it's an apples and oranges
Right.
thing,
Exactly.
yeah, we
Can't add them
we shouldn't have
together.
added them together.
100%. Right.
Get it.
So the 92.7 is the total minimum residential factor. That's the total of what we have for value on residential.
We got it. That took care of it.
That, I had the same question before
Yeah.
the presentation, and I was shown this, and, maybe next year we'll actually put this in the
I
packet, so it's
As
clear.
think that's a
opposed
really
to-
good idea.
Yeah.
And if, we'll talk about it at the end, I have another suggestion.
Alright. Alright, moving on.
Can we go to the next spreadsheet? This next spreadsheet is allowing you to see the impact if you were to choose a shift rate.
Use the percentage up there too.
And again, these, can you see it?
They have it in there.
Yeah,
This is page 8 of the presentation, is that
Right.
correct?
It's easy to read in our.
Yeah, I have it here as well.
So the top part of the form are the values with the percentages by each class. And then it's the rate shift in increments of 5% until you get to your maximum, which is the 1.5. And you can see the tax impact.
I may just point out one other thing, real quick, Deb, is some of you may have been wondering in your packet, on the average single-family property amount, and
Yeah.
then the average residential property amount, two different items One is a single-family home, and the other, which is the 438, is residential class. So that includes other,
Condos, your residential land, everything is lumped into the residential class.
Okay. So I have a few questions on that, but I'll wait till you get to that part.
So the bottom part of this is the class totals by number of parcels. And again, this, what we were just discussing with the total residential parcels being 5,318 and the average value is 438,292. This would be the tax implication with the amount of taxes paid if we were to shift.
Mr.
Quick
Prisco.
Thank you. Question then, how could the parcels go down on the residential side when we're continuing to build in town?
Well, we're actually, do you remember when we took some of those small slivers of land
Yep,
along Main Street?
Yep.
Well, we actually lost 3 vacant land parcels that were consumed into the abutting parcel.
Mhm.
So there's 3 of them. We also had some A&Rs that were joined together. I have to tie out those parcels every year.
but they weren't taxed properties.
But they were part of the inventory, if you want to call it that. They were part of the inventory.
What about the new properties, though? We're building on new lots around town. I see a few at least.
Yeah.
So wouldn't there be an offset to the 3 that we gave up? I mean, it just seems that we went from 5,321 down to 5,318
18 on the residential side.
on the residential, which just doesn't equate if you look at the building permits and all the things that are going on.
Right, and I'll explain, if we just take Little Meadow,
Yep.
that 29 lot subdivision, that was part of our packet last year. So yes,
Right.
those are building permits this year. And then we had 314, 316 Haverhill Street. Those were added on last year. I don't have that in front of me, but I can assure you that I have to tie all those out. What I have in 2014 to what I have in 2015. The number of 101s that have changed, I can tell you there are 12 new houses, and one house actually consumed.
What's a 101?
A single family.
Residential.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
A single family. So I have to tie all those out. And then with my 130s, which are the vacant land, how many went from vacant land to improved lots, like the subdivision?
And it still went down?
We did go down, yes.
I just cannot believe it, Deb. I'm sorry. I just cannot believe that to
We
be true.
didn't have a whole lot of activity from A&Rs or approval not required. We didn't have any major subdivisions this year. We really, and there's not a lot coming on this year either.
Then tying into that, then how can the residential rate go up over 7% or almost 7% and everything else went down or stayed the same?
Right, our
Well, part
commercial
of it's
pretty
the,
much
the
stayed
additional
flat.
borrowing of the school money.
But we already had the borrowing the school money. I don't think that,
No.
this is assessed value.
No,
but
no, no, no.
This is assessed value.
No,
Yes.
no. When we borrow the money and it becomes part of debt service, then that adds to,
The assessed value?
no, it adds to the tax rate.
I'm not talking about the tax rate.
Oh, so
I'm talking
sorry.
about the
He's
value.
talking about the
Value.
assessed value.
The property value
Oh,
last
okay.
year was 13 and change.
454.
And now it's, no,
I'm talking average family, single family. home.
last year was
450.
413,284.
And this year we're
That's what,
at.
it was in our packet last year.
Yeah,
And now it went up $25,000, the assessed value went up 25 grand to this.
Right.
So that's a 7% increase. But then when you look at personal property, that actually went down, and commercial barely went up at all. It basically stayed flat.
It did,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, let's just
And
stay
that
with
has nothing to do with the school.
Oh, no, okay. I thought-
the
sorry,
single
misunderstood what you were
families.
talking about.
The reason you're seeing that increase, we do have to perform what's called an interim adjustment every year. The interim adjustment proves out by means of sale price what people are purchasing property for. And if there's purchasing property 100,000, let's just use that, above my assessed value, we have to raise that value so that we can certify with the Department of Revenue. So yes, our assessed value did go up. Our assessed value for a single-family home last year was $454,500. This year, our average single-family home is, let me just make sure I have the right one here,
Maybe I have the wrong number.
is
sir.
$482,670. Now, that's your new house, you're looking
Okay,
at that
so-
chart and it's all residential. That's your condos, your single family, your vacant land.
Okay. I
So-
got you.
And your vacant land.
All right,
Okay? Feel better?
it's clear as mud. I'm done.
So when you have houses that are selling at or above my assessed value, I have to certify those values within a 10% of that sale price.
So for each, I'm sorry, yeah.
Go, no, you guys.
So, Mr. Chairman, so for each, you're talking about, for each individual single-family home that sells, if it sells above your assessed value, you have to be within 10% of the sale price?
You can't do, that wouldn't be mass appraisal. In mass appraisal, we would, there's 6 ways to Sunday that we actually have to do it, and I hate to use that phrase, but we have to do it by neighborhood. If you take a neighborhood, and let's just stay on Little Meadow. If I have sales down there that are indicating anywhere between $950,000 to $1 million, which is what I'm seeing, I have to have my values within 10% for that neighborhood, that style home. So there's many different
I got you.
relations that I have to certify these numbers to.
Right, the point I'm trying to make is it's not affecting town-wide, it's affecting that,
Jurisdictional.
right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
It's still the same
Absolutely.
percentage, though, when you
Yeah.
look at it from this,
So-
in the previous
So
shot.
what
I get it.
happens is there's a levy limit.
That we have to meet.
And
My
you've got evaluations, and the valuations change around so that, you know, somebody living in a ranch house on a given year may see a bigger tax increase than someone living in a $1 million mansion, just because of the way people are
That's right.
buying and selling properties.
And one of the things I am seeing predominantly right now is the lower assessed homes are being sold at, say if I have them assessed at $350,000, they're being sold at $480,000, then another $100,000 permit on top of that. So where our lower end homes, and this is not uncommon for this type of, trying to think of a word here, for this type of economy coming out of it. This is very traditional, I see it all the time. They'll buy a ranch, they'll take $100,000 and they'll put a second floor on it. It's very common. That's where a lot of our numbers are gonna come from next year.
Mr. Prisco?
So, the commercial side, is it a different approach?
The commercial side has to have I have to have 3 approaches to value for the commercial. I have to have a market, which is sale indicator, and then I have to have an income, and then I have to have a cost. What it would cost to build that building today, less the depreciation for it, which is the age, if you want to.
I mean, since I've been on the board, it has not moved at all.
Well, we
And
did
the
have-
residential side continued, well, there was one year we had some flexibility.
Correct.
Some increase, but it's been pretty flat. And it just, to me, you continue to see 7%, 7%, 8%, 7% on the residential side. It's
Yeah,
really
we
challenging.
but again, North Reading's a bedroom community, so if we were
understand.
Burlington, you would see the market change in your commercial and industrial more than what we see now.
Yeah.
You
The
see what
burden
I'm
is on the
saying? Your
residential side.
4 or 5% is very traditional for a bedroom community.
But the burden is bared on the residential side.
That's correct.
It is.
Yes,
So, it's
absolutely.
unfortunate.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Yule?
Yep. If I understood correctly, this is house-specific or structure-specific, meaning that you gave an example, I believe, of a ranch, and if the sales of typical houses, typical ranches, were to exceed $100,000, or above that 10% number that you had mentioned, that their increase can be greater than a $3 million home that only had sales that were very small increase with underneath that 10%. So is the increase, the tax levy increase on them greater, the lower end properties because of the construction, or if it was purchased, whatever the case might be?
Let me
Am
make sure I
being clear?
understand your
Okay.
question. You're saying in any given year that the assessed values, the lower end properties can receive a greater impact and higher valuations for that given year than our $1 million homes?
Yes, that's
Is
pretty
that
much-
it?
Yes.
Yes, our values are market driven. Our values are market driven. I don't create these numbers, they're driven by the market, what people are willing to purchase the
Right.
property for.
Right.
And that's,
Not so much market, but really, what will people willing to pay?
exactly,
No, okay.
exactly.
I understand that.
That's
I
out of
mean,
your
we have a
control.
house right over here, it's going for almost 550, right in back of us. Just seen it listed today. That's your $380,000 neighborhood over there.
Mm.
You have ranches, you have some, what I call conventional. They're not a ranch, they're not a cape, they're not a colonial.
There's not enough
They're-
inventory on the
They've
market.
had add-ons or whatever. So what happens is with the 3 new houses that have occurred on that given road, it will drive the value for that neighborhood.
Regardless of the type of house it is, because I was being more house-specific, I guess, that it's really that neighborhood is seeing, or that section is seeing the value of houses or the cost of houses rising way above the norm for that community. So therefore, their taxes are going up in, you said, the house is for $500,000, whatever you said, okay? But normally the houses are valued about $380. I think that's the number you used. Or about there.
It can occur, Jeff,
Okay.
if the market dictates it,
But it-
yes.
Yeah, but if you have 3 houses over there, as you said, then you have to reevaluate that whole section over there, and their taxes will go up based on the valuation of the
Well,
three new-
their
three new-
value,
valuation.
their value would be impacted.
Right.
Their value would be impacted, yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other?
Any other questions?
Finance committee, no?
So I did, in closing, I'd like to give you a little bit of information. Annually, we discuss, little sidelines, if you will. The average residential property for which we just did discuss, for 2015 is $482,670, up from $454,500 in 2014. The commercial and industrial, I'm excluding the personal property because during previous classifications, we kind of felt like that convoluted that number. That is up to 955,041, and in 2014, it was 950. So, yes, you're looking at a 2% increase, or 1%, really.
1%, yeah.
1%,
7% on the residential.
right, right. The other thing I'd like to make note to is the income and expense forms. We didn't yield as many returns as I had really hoped for this year. Last year, we received 64% returned. We mailed out 288, and we only received 60% returned.
How many?
64.
Okay.
Well-
60% returned for this year, for
This year.
15.
But
Yes.
in past years, we were in the,
We were
Below
climbing, we
20%.
were gaining on
Yeah.
it. We
So-
have,
I thought the rule was, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought the policy we put in place as a board was if they don't submit, then you tax them at the highest rate possible for that type of business.
and I do. I also have a code of ethics that I can't just slap, a high number that I don't feel really that property would yield on the open market. So I do, they are taxed at 100% valuation. And then they also receive the $250 penalty for not returning them.
So what does that tell you when you do all that,
Oh,
right?
I know.
This is why I told you,
I know.
years ago, I brought up a major
Yep,
issue
2
with this
years
whole
ago,
thing.
exactly, because I have been.
And I know we've made improvements, and I appreciate you putting up with all my anxiety over this issue, but this
Well,
what
because
frustrates
it's
me.
real.
With
It's
that, right,
real.
it's not fair when you see, when the commercial base in the business community around here, they want the support of the community, but when you see the community continue to have 7 and 8 and 9% increases every year, and they get a very small increase, and this kind of behavior happens, and they get to use a completely different process than we do, or assess value on the residential, and their income and expense, it's completely different, and they get to use pre-tax dollars and all that, you add it up, it's unfair, and to me, I'm disgusted to hear the numbers are now going back in the other way. It tells you something, it's not fair, and the business community should do the right thing, submit the paperwork, and be fair to the residential communities picking up the majority of these increases. It's wrong.
I agree.
If there was
And
something
we
more we
are-
could do, I would tell the board, we should do it. I'm very frustrated with it.
Well,
We are as
there is something we
aggressive.
can do. I'm not sure anyone has the stomach to do it at this point, since we're trying to grow our commercial base.
You're right.
Right.
You're right. Yeah, it's tough. And we have work to do too. We haven't done our full effort on the infrastructure side to implement a shift right now, but you're right. We can do that. And if the board wants to discuss that tonight, I'd be more than happy, because especially after hearing that, I'm tempted.
And I do keep my notes, Mike, because I know this is something that,
I know you do,
we've
Deb.
had the discussion, and we are being as aggressive as we can be within limits.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
we have.
Deb, there's only so
guidelines.
much you can
And
do.
I totally agree.
You're
Totally
a
agree.
2-person shop, 1.5-person shop. I mean, 3-person shop, it doesn't matter. Even if you were 10 people, you still wouldn't have enough to get the people to submit this paperwork. It's just
Well,
wrong.
The other thing that, makes you think a little bit, if they're reluctant to submit the paperwork and you're assessing them at 100%
Plus a fine.
plus a fine, then we're not assessing them enough.
Bingo.
Well, that's been Mike's contention
You know,
all
I
along.
mean-
We might issue all along
Yeah.
for 5 years.
Because if we were assessing them, over-assessing them, they would certainly put some effort into providing information to be fairly
Correct.
assessed.
I would hope that the guidelines for certification in commercial and industrial valuation to the DOR is if, we'll just take a retail space. If I have retail space, my parameters are on a low to a high. In other words, location would be a factor. Retail on Main Street's gonna be much better than retail on Park Street. Just use that as a scenario. If I take a piece of property and I raise that value out of that parameter, I need to have real good justification. Because if I don't, they're not gonna certify our values. So that's just a scenario of how I have to submit my data to the Department of Revenue for certification. And we do take a high and a low. We don't just take one number. We don't just take $12. And we do look at these I&Es every single year. Every year. And I should probably explain, an I&E is an income and expense form that is mandated, actually, by Mass General Law under a 38D for them to return it to all municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
We need to bring this up to our legislators too, because it's not working. Our residents, when you continue to see 8, 7, 8, 9% increases on them, and these people that don't submit are only getting a 1 or 2%, maybe less than 2% every year, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's wrong.
I will tell you, I know after the classification hearing last year, I had said if anyone brings them in, because we're in the middle of just getting ready to do the tax file, so it hasn't been committed yet on the tax bill, and I didn't receive one return. But I can tell you, I did have someone come in today, and he was very upset that he had to pay it last year, and my clerk said to him, well, it's law, here's what you've received, this is the date it went out, this was the date of the second mailing. We even do a second mailing. And budget-wise, we may have to cut out that second mailing, which is gonna reduce this percentage, which I really, it's not gonna be a real number, because we do generate a higher return on that second mailing than the first. And we mail them out at corporate tax time. I mean, we can't be any more efficient to the commercial and industrial. If we mail them in February, their corporate taxes are due March 15th.
Yeah.
That's a convenience. You
Right.
already have
Yeah.
your accountant
You can't do any more to help these people.
working on your
Yeah.
numbers, which is why we choose that date. We don't even look at them till August or July. So those were just the updates that I had in closing. Are there any other questions?
Maybe one suggestion for next year. Maybe in a formatting, is it possible to include this year's presentation, or at least some of the numbers?
It's like a side-by-side?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. So I think, you're right, other board members, would you, do you think?
Compared with the previous
Yeah.
year?
Yeah, and maybe,
Yeah.
I personally like maybe the past 3 years
Yeah.
myself. Very good. Yeah, very good. For me,
Yeah.
this would be
Yeah,
helpful.
Side by side is great.
Especially as we have new members on the board,
Yeah.
seeing it for the first time, or even only the second time. It could be challenging to kind of pull this stuff together, so. Yeah, as creative as you can get. I mean, Liz, you did a nice job with our budget formats, that I think there's probably some lessons learned and we can improve in the presentation of this
It's on
stuff.
PowerPoint this year.
Very good. I'm very proud of you, Debbie. Baby
I said
steps,
to
but
Liz,
they're
I
all
go,
good,
"Liz,
positive
After
steps.
doing the PowerPoint for Mike this year, I go, we really gotta get classification on PowerPoint this year.
That's
That
all
was-
I have. though.
That was a
Thank you.
breeze. So in closing, I would, it is also the duty of the assessors to let you be aware of the excess levy capacity and the excess levy capacity that is available, 12,355.39.
Thank you.
We have to vote on that too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a motion.
There
in
is
the
a motion
packet,
with a
right?
number in it.
44?
Yeah.
Yeah, what, yes, it has the
So
44 million.
any further discussion from the board? Questions? From the town administrator?
I have no questions at this time. At this point, we've provided the acting clerk a series of the motions that would relate to the
Right.
actions that the board needs to take.
Yep.
I think they're in the appropriate order too.
I believe they are,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to try to understand something with the tax levy in particular. In June town meeting, we created a budget, and now we are putting the numbers together to satisfy that budget. Is that a fair?
That's very
Perspective.
fair.
Okay.
So, but the budget that we created and we voted on June and adjusted in April were based on revenue estimates,
Estimates.
right?
Right.
They were based on the tax levy, 2.5% more than last year, plus new growth,
Right.
and our estimated local receipts and state aid, which we know what those numbers were
Okay.
at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
At
they
that-
weren't necessarily
now.
voted by the town meeting, but
Yeah.
we knew pretty much what they were.
Right.
So, all these numbers are submitted to DOR for approval. Make sure everything, it's a Schedule A that gets filled out.
Mhm.
Every community fills it out.
It just seemed to
And,
me that,
When the approval comes back,
Yeah.
then it's up to us to make the critical decisions on the split and all of the other items that we talked about this evening.
it just seems to me that we're doing, the process is kind of in reverse. Normally, and I'm just asking the questions because it's something that's, I guess, interesting to me. It's not by no means a criticism, because we have to deal with what we have to deal with. But it would seem to me that our responsibility should be to create a budget and with the money that we know that we have, rather than have to guess and then come to this process. It just seems to me to be.
No,
in reverse.
you're
Yeah.
missing something.
Yeah.
The budget that is produced,
Right,
right, is based on estimates of
Right.
what we're going to be.
right.
If in fact, when all this information was submitted to the Department of Revenue, and it's happened to some communities, right, and the budget isn't balanced, then you have to have another town meeting to
Right.
Right.
make appropriate adjustments. It seems backwards, right, but it's, every community in the state does the same thing. I think that if communities that are, if you're concerned about the estimated tax bill piece of it, why we have to make an estimated tax bill? Because we're billing quarterly instead of at the end of the fiscal year. So, in the process, the state allows the communities to bill at 1/4 of the total tax bill from last year
Mhm.
for the first 2 quarters. And then, once the tax rate is set, which we're in the process of doing, and provided we can get the tax bill out by the end of December, our citizens are required to pay that bill, which is an adjusted bill. In other words, it's more than an average of 4 bills, because it's make up for the previous 2 bills. And that process has been in place, and when you were on the board
Yeah.
several years ago, it was the same process.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion at this point? Mr. Yule?
Okay. The public hearing tax rate setting classification. Mr. Chairman, I move to establish a tax classification factor of 1.0.
Second.
Discussion? So just so that there's no question to the public, the 1.0 classification means that there is no tax split, that the tax rate will be applied uniformly to residential, commercial, and industrial taxpayers. Mr. Briscoe?
You know, when we're here next year, though, I really think the board has to take a hard line on this income and expense discussion. And I think this is the area where we need to have the discussion. When you continue to see the increase in the assessed value on our residents, who are bearing 87% of this increase, we owe it to them to at least have a serious discussion. So I'd ask us to note it and be prepared next year when we get, maybe even a little earlier than we get to this, to have this discussion, put it on our agenda. I'm very disappointed to hear these numbers, and we were making great progress, and I know we're far better than when we were when I was here 5 years ago. And I appreciate everything you have done. I know there's not more you can do.
I was pretty
But I think
saddened
that-
to see the 4% decrease in the return too.
But I think it's this board, we're the ones representing this community, and the community, we answer to them, and they need to hear from us. In our business community, our chamber, we need to reach out to them, we need to get them involved in this discussion, they need to get the word out. Be fair to what you ask us to be, shop at your stores and to work it, and do our business here in this town. Well, we need you to fill out the paperwork and deliver what you're required to deliver, so it's fair to everybody.
It's fair and equitable across the board when all the data is
Absolutely.
in there for analyzing.
But I'm gonna vote in favor of
If
this
there's
motion.
anything that I can do to assist, if there's anything that I can do to produce reports or whatever, by all means, give me a call. I'd be happy to do it.
We know that, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Mr. Yule,
Yes,
skip over the split rate.
yes, I'm doing that. Mr. Chairman, I believe we're not to, Mr. Chairman, I move not to establish a commercial exemption.
Or residential.
Oh, you want to read the top, it's the top one,
Yeah.
It's okay. Mr. Chairman, I move not to establish a residential exemption.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Prisco. Any discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Mr. Yule,
Mr. Chairman, I move not to establish a commercial exemption.
do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Fode. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. And lastly, Mr. Yule.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend for the year 2015, property tax levy at $44,382,164.61, which is $12,355.39 less than the levy limit.
Do I hear a second? Second by Mr. Fode. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend to the Board of Assessors that the FY 2015 tax rate be set at, excuse me, $16.62 per $1,000 for valuation.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fode. Just a question, Deborah. Do we know how much of that is related to exempt debt? Do we have the split of that?
I do have the valuation for the exempt, and the exempt valuation did go up, obviously, from the school.
I'm just wondering what portion of that tax rate is related to exempt debt, not just the school.
Through valuation. The exempt value is $279,645 for FY 2015.
You got that?
And just bear with me for 1 second, because I do have 2014 in here. For 2014, the valuation for the exempt was 206,744, 206,744 even. So it's an increase of 68, 69, 70,000, somewhere around there, right?
206,744,000.
No, what I'm trying to get to is, if
Yeah.
the total tax rate's $16.62.
Mhm.
If we didn't have exempt debt, which the largest portion is the school,
Correct.
the tax rate would be lower by some amount. I'm trying to find out what that amount is. So it's roughly the debt, non-exempt, I mean, the exempt debt service. Can you calculate it?
I'll do that for right now.
Okay. In the meantime, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll just,
Can I just ask one question? Maybe
Yes.
I missed it. Did we take a vote on the open space discount?
That
was
wasn't,
not here.
it's not a motion we have in our packet.
Recall hearing it.
If you have a motion,
do we need it?
If you use the residential exemption and just insert open space discount and take the vote off of the same verbiage,
To not establish.
to not establish, yes.
To establish. Open space, you said?
Open space discount?
Not exemption, just discount.
Correct.
yeah, but have we ever done this before? I don't
Yes.
ever recall us having a motion like this. We have.
Mr.
I
Yule,
vaguely remember doing that.
are you prepared to read it?
Yeah,
or-
I'm prepared to read. I was just waiting for Mike.
Go
'cause he had a
ahead, yeah,
question.
go, no.
Okay.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, I move not to establish an open space discount.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. Fode. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Our secretary should make a note that Mr. O'Leary had recused himself from this previously. The previous meeting.
And I do have it on here.
What?
I have it on these sheets as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
Thank
for all your
you.
work.
Before I adjourn the meeting, I'm just waiting for Liz to come up with a number. While we're waiting, we have a meeting scheduled for next Monday?
Yep.
Regular meeting?
Yep.
I think Mr. O'Leary may be absent.
Flying back that day, but I should make it, I'm supposed to land at 3 o'clock, so I should have no problem getting in, weather dependent, obviously. But for some reason I don't hold up because of me.
Why do we have a quorum?
Well, you will. You'll have.
So you want all exempt debt? You don't want just the school?
Well, most of it is school anyway, correct?
Except for,
The
Yeah, except for
difference in, the
maybe
difference in the
$1 million.
valuation
The
of the
police-
school, there were only 2 permits.
Just make it simple, just do the exempt debt.
yeah, we can back it out.
I might have to get that to you. My computer's not responding to me to open up the total exempt debt.
Well, can you do the school debt then? Can't do that either.
Probably not. Our computer's not working.
Yeah, the connection is not pulling it up, so. I believe that last year, if I'm not mistaken, the increase was 12% with the exempt debt. So I would say we borrowed another 18 million, so it could be 16%. But I'll get you the exact figure.
All right, so we'll have it at our next meeting?
Yes,
Okay, fine.
if not
I'll
sooner.
entertain a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
unless someone has.
There, they did it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, great job.